Have you ever wondered? The darkest moment of a dynasty comes not from foreign invasion, but from within the closest family bonds. When Amnon defiled his own sister Tamar, when Absalom avenged his sister's honor by taking Amnon's life, when this son, for the sake of power, openly betrayed his father David, what depths of hatred could turn siblings against each other and set father against son? In this tale of desire and betrayal, you will witness the darkest corners of human nature and understand the true meaning of redemption and forgiveness. This is not just a family tragedy from 3,000 years ago, but a mirror reflecting human nature. Want to know this life-changing story? Please subscribe, turn on notifications, and watch until the end. Join me in exploring one of the most profound revelations in the Bible. In the light of truth, find the answers of life. Let us return to the glorious kingdom of David. David, as the king of Israel, ruled over this prosperous land. He had many wives and bore many children. As recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 3, Amnon was David's firstborn, born to Ahinoam, by tradition heir to the throne. Among the many siblings, Tamar was renowned for her extraordinary beauty. She was David's daughter by Maacah and shared the same mother with Absalom. Absalom was not only Tamar's brother, but her closest protector. In the palace of Jerusalem, these young lives seemed to dwell in paradise. Yet the dark side of human nature was quietly growing. Amnon developed forbidden feelings for his half-sister Tamar. This twisted affection grew day by day, leaving him restless. As recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 13, he became sick with desire for his sister Tamar. His close friend Jonadab saw through his thoughts. Jonadab was the son of David's brother Shimea, a man of great cunning. He advised Amnon, devising a sinister plan. He suggested Amnon pretend to be ill and ask the king to send Tamar to care for him. This seemingly innocent request concealed a dangerous trap. King David, unaware of the truth, granted this request, and so a carefully crafted deception began to unfold. Tamar came to Amnon's room with sisterly love. Her pure and kind heart led her into a terrible trap. Tamar, following her father's command, came to Amnon's room. She prepared food for her sick brother with her own hands to show her care. Yet this pure sibling affection was shattered in that moment. As recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 14, Amnon would not listen to her. He relied on his power and committed this most detestable act. Tamar's pleas and tears could not awaken his conscience. She said this was not done in Israel. What a disgrace it would be. But these words were powerless before evil. Even more heartbreaking, after the sin, Amnon's heart changed completely. His love for Tamar instantly turned to intense hatred. He drove her from the room, bolted the door, subjecting her to double shame, tore her ornate robe, defiled her hair with dust. This was how deep sorrow was expressed in those days. She put her hands on her head, walking and weeping, crying out in anguish. This once radiant young woman lost everything in a single day: her purity, her dignity, her future, all shattered by her brother's betrayal. When Absalom saw his sister's state, he immediately understood what had happened. He comforted Tamar, saying, "Do not take this to heart." But beneath this calm surface, seeds of revenge were already planted. When King David heard of this, he was furious. But as a father, he was caught in an agonizing dilemma. Amnon was his firstborn, his pride, the first heir to the throne, and Tamar was his beloved daughter. Now bearing such shame, he had to maintain royal dignity while upholding righteous judgment. This inner struggle left him weak. He chose silence. This seemingly wise inaction was actually a fatal oversight, for unjust silence often brings greater harm than the crime itself. This decision would lay the groundwork for an even greater family tragedy. Such an action ignited an unquenchable fire in Absalom's heart. Absalom buried this hatred deep within. He spoke neither good nor bad to Amnon. This deliberate silence was all the more unsettling. For 2 full years, he waited for his moment, as recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 23. The opportunity finally came at Baal-Hazor near Ephraim, during the time of sheep shearing. What should have been a joyous harvest celebration, Absalom turned into a stage for revenge. He invited all the king's sons to the feast, his intentions deeply hidden. He specifically went to see King David, requesting Amnon's presence. Though David initially refused, he eventually consented. Perhaps he thought time had healed all wounds, or hoped this would be a chance for brotherly reconciliation. Yet he did not know what consequences this decision would bring. Absalom had already commanded his servants to watch Amnon closely, waiting for when he would be in high spirits, merry with wine. This was the perfect moment, and the most vulnerable time, as recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 28. He commanded, saying, "Watch, when I tell you to strike Amnon down, then kill him. Do not be afraid. Be strong and courageous. Have I not commanded you?" At that seemingly joyous feast, a carefully planned revenge was unfolding. When the wine flowed freely, at the height of the banquet, Absalom's servants acted on their master's command. They suddenly surrounded and struck Amnon down. 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 29 describes that moment of chaos. All the king's sons rose in panic, mounted their mules, and fled. The news spread like wildfire to Jerusalem. Initial rumors claimed all the king's sons were killed. This caused King David to tear his clothes and fall face down on the ground. His officials also stood beside him, their clothes torn. But you should know, rumors always spread faster than truth. David's nephew Jonadab said, "Do not think all the princes are dead." This was Absalom's intention since the day Amnon defiled his sister Tamar. The truth of this revenge finally surfaced. Absalom fled immediately to Geshur, the land of his grandfather Talmai. There he hid for 3 full years, leaving David alone in Jerusalem to bear the grief of losing his son. This once mighty king was now just a father who had lost his son. He mourned for Amnon, yet his heart ached for Absalom. 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 39 tells us, King David's heart yearned for Absalom, for he was consoled concerning Amnon's death. Commander Joab saw the king's heart. He knew David's growing longing for Absalom, but bound by royal dignity, David found it difficult to actively recall this son who bore guilt. So Joab devised a wise plan. He brought a wise woman from Tekoa, instructing her how to speak before the king. 2 Samuel chapter 14 records this scene of wisdom. The woman, dressed in mourning clothes, came and fell face down before the king. She told the king her family story, said she had 2 sons who fought in the field. One struck the other and killed him. Now the whole clan demanded she hand over the living son, to put him to death. She begged for the king's protection, not to lose her only remaining son. This story cleverly mirrored David's own situation. When David promised to protect her son, the woman immediately pointed out the king's contradiction. She said, "Why does the king grant such favor to her, yet not to his own son? Why not bring back his banished one?" 2 Samuel chapter 14, verse 14 records her words of wisdom. "We must all die, like water spilled on the ground which cannot be gathered up again. But God does not take away life. Instead, he devises ways so that a banished person may not remain estranged from him." These words touch the softest part of David's heart, showing him the possibility of forgiveness and reconciliation. As Psalm 103 says, "The Lord is compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in loving kindness." David finally made his decision, commanding Joab to bring Absalom back. Absalom finally returned to Jerusalem. But this was not a complete reconciliation. 2 Samuel chapter 14, verse 24 tells us, "The king said, 'Let him return to his own house. He must not see my face.'" This seemingly merciful command actually buried a deeper rift. Absalom lived in Jerusalem for 2 full years, yet never saw the king's face. This distant attitude made the bitterness in his heart grow day by day. Can you imagine? A wanderer returns home, yet cannot see his own father. This formal return only deepened the spiritual divide. Absalom's beauty was unmatched in all Israel. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him. But this outward perfection could not cover his inner wounds. He began using various ways to attract his father's attention, even burning Joab's fields, just to force Joab to arrange a meeting with David. When father and son finally met, David and Absalom embraced. On the surface, it was a tender moment, but those with discerning eyes could see it was merely a political performance. For true reconciliation requires open hearts, requires facing past wounds, requires sincere dialogue, and all these were covered by false ceremony. The hatred in Absalom's heart did not disperse. Instead, it grew stronger in this superficial reconciliation. As Proverbs says, hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers over all wrongs. This unresolved hatred would soon reveal itself in the struggle for power. A greater conspiracy was forming in his heart. This would push the entire kingdom into a deeper abyss. Absalom began executing his scheme at Jerusalem's gate. 2 Samuel chapter 15 records. He would get up early and stand by the road to the city gate. Whenever anyone came with a complaint to be placed before the king, he would call out to them, listen to their cases with sympathy. He would say your claims are valid, but the king has no deputy to hear you. He cleverly pointed out the flaws in the royal justice system and suggested if he were judge, everyone would receive justice. Day after day, he won people's hearts with sweet words. When people bowed before him, he would take them in his arms and kiss them. This approachable demeanor won him the people's favor. In secret, Absalom had begun planning greater actions. He sent secret messengers throughout the tribes of Israel, instructing them, saying, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpets, say Absalom is king in Hebron. Under the pretext of offering sacrifice, he asked his father's permission to go to Hebron. This city where David first became king would become the starting point of his rebellion. 200 men went with him from Jerusalem. They were unaware of his true intentions. Even Ahithophel, David's most trusted counselor, secretly joined Absalom. The forces of rebellion grew stronger in the shadows. Popular support flowed like a tide toward this handsome prince. 2 Samuel chapter 15 verse 12 says, the conspiracy gained strength. Absalom spent 4 years setting this grand scheme. When the time was ripe, he finally removed his mask. Trumpets sounded throughout Israel. The rebellion officially began. It all came so suddenly, yet was somehow expected. For when a family loses trust and communication, any surface peace can collapse overnight. When news of the rebellion reached the palace, David made an immediate decision. 2 Samuel chapter 15 verse 14 records him telling his officials, we must flee at once, or none of us will escape from Absalom. This once invincible king, now fleeing from his own son, barefoot, head covered, weeping as he climbed the Mount of Olives. The people following him also covered their heads, weeping as they went. Even the priests Zadok and the Levites carried the Ark of the Covenant with them. But David said, take God's Ark back to the city. If I find favor in the Lord's eyes, he will bring me back to see it again. Even in flight, he maintained his reverence for God. Jerusalem quickly fell to Absalom. This city David had carefully built now belonged to his rebellious son. When Absalom entered the city, the people shouted, "Long live the king," welcoming their new ruler. He immediately gathered his advisors to discuss how to consolidate power. Officials once loyal to David switched their allegiance. Even Ahithophel, David's most trusted counselor, turned to Absalom, making Jerusalem's change of hands particularly ironic. Absalom followed Ahithophel's advice, set up a tent on the palace roof, in the sight of all Israel, defiled his father's concubines. 2 Samuel chapter 16 verse 22 records this scene. This was not only the greatest usurpation and humiliation of royal authority, but also fulfilled prophet Nathan's prophecy. This act declared to all Israel, the break with his father was beyond repair. A military confrontation was now inevitable. Absalom hastened war preparations in Jerusalem. He appointed his cousin Amasa as commander, replacing Joab's position, gathering the elite warriors of Israel, preparing to pursue his father, while David organized his army beyond the Jordan, dividing his followers into 3 groups, preparing for battle. This was no longer a simple political contest, but a family's final resolution on the battlefield. The decisive battle unfolded in the forest of Ephraim. This dense forest became witness to this civil war. 2 Samuel chapter 18 records. The battle was fierce. David's army, though outnumbered, prevailed, defeating Absalom's great army. That day the forest claimed more lives than the sword. This was a heartbreaking victory. As Absalom fled on his mule, his pride, his long hair, became the instrument of his death. His hair caught in the tree branches, leaving him suspended between heaven and earth. The mule went on without him, leaving him hanging there alone. When Joab heard the news, disregarding David's orders, he took 3 javelins, while Absalom was still alive, thrust them through his heart, ending the life of this rebellious son. They threw Absalom into a large pit in the forest, piled a large heap of rocks over him, becoming his grave. When the news reached David, this father's heart was shattered. 2 Samuel chapter 18 verse 33 records his grief. As when he wept, "O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. O Absalom, my son, my son." These cries of anguish echoed from the tower of Mahanaim. The joy of victory instantly turned to mourning. Joab had to remind David he still had kingly duties. Though the rebellion was quelled, Israel's tribes fell into chaos. People began to remember David's past achievements, realizing it was he who had saved them from their enemies. So they discussed bringing the king back. This rebellion ended in tragedy, yet left us with profound lessons. As Proverbs says, "Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall." These acts of rebellion seemed accidental, yet fulfilled prophet Nathan's prophecy to David. After David sinned with Bathsheba, their first child, as Nathan had said, died on the 7th day after birth. 2 Samuel chapter 12 verse 14 records this sad ending. Despite David's fasting and prayer, lying prostrate pleading, this innocent life departed from the world. This was the first fulfillment of the prophecy. Even heavier was the second prophecy. The sword would never depart from his house. This curse hung like a shadow over David's family, beginning with Amnon defiling his half-sister Tamar, to Absalom avenging his sister by killing his eldest brother Amnon. The cycle of violence in the family never ceased. Brothers at war, siblings destroying each other. This once glorious royal house fell into endless turmoil. Each bloodshed confirmed the prophet's words. The third prophecy was fulfilled in the most humiliating way. Absalom openly rebelled against his father, seized the throne. In full view of Jerusalem, he lay with his father's concubines on the palace roof. This was the greatest trampling of royal dignity. Just as Nathan had prophesied, "You did this thing in secret, but I will do this thing before all Israel." In broad daylight, all this happened under the sun, bringing great shame to David's dynasty. The fulfillment of these prophecies had profound impact on the dynasty, shaking the foundation of David's rule, showing the Israelites that even a king after God's own heart could not escape the consequences of sin. As Psalm 89 says, "If they forsake my law and do not follow my statutes, I will punish their transgression with the rod." All this reminds us how heavy is the price of sin. Yet in this seemingly hopeless punishment, God's mercy was also contained. When David grew old and weak, another power struggle quietly unfolded. Adonijah was David's fourth son, proud by nature. 1 Kings chapter 1 verse 5 says, "He exalted himself, saying, 'I will be king,' seeing his father's declining health. He thought his time had come. While David was weak, unable to handle state affairs, he began paving his way to the throne. He prepared chariots and horses, and 50 men to run before him, openly imitating his dead brother Absalom. Adonijah quickly won support from important figures. Commander Joab and priest Abiathar sided with him. These two old ministers who once followed David through life and death now chose to support this arrogant prince. He held a great feast at En Rogel, invited the royal princes and court officials, sacrificed cattle and sheep, hosting a grand banquet, displaying his grandeur. But he deliberately did not invite Solomon and prophet Nathan. This guest list itself revealed his ambition. While Adonijah's supporters celebrated at the feast, Solomon did not wait passively. Prophet Nathan and Solomon's mother Bathsheba promptly informed David, reminding him of his oath to make Solomon king. King David made an immediate decisive decision. 1 Kings chapter 1 verse 29 records, "He swore by the Lord who has delivered my life from all distress. I will surely carry out today what I swore to you, to make Solomon his successor to the throne." This decision came timely and firmly, showing the elderly king still possessed his former resolve. David immediately ordered a grand coronation ceremony. He commanded priest Zadok and prophet Nathan to have Solomon ride on the king's mule, to begin spring to anoint him king. Priest Zadok took the horn of oil from the sacred tent, anointed Solomon, blew the trumpet, and proclaimed. All the people shouted, "Long live King Solomon." People followed playing flutes and rejoicing. The ground shook with their sound. When these shouts reached Adonijah's ears at his feast, his banquet came to an abrupt end. Guests fled in all directions. Adonijah, fearing Solomon, took hold of the horns of the altar. This once proud prince now only begged for his life. Solomon responded with magnanimity, saying, "If he shows himself worthy, not a hair of his head will fall to the ground." This was the first act of mercy at the dawn of the new dynasty. Solomon officially ascended to Israel's throne. A new era of wisdom and peace was about to begin. As the Psalms prophesied, "He will establish your throne forever." This young king would lead Israel into its most glorious golden age. And all this began with his father David's humble submission to God's will. This also showed God's mercy toward his children. From Amnon's sin to Absalom's revenge, from father-son estrangement to dynasty turmoil, each turn reminds us the price of sin is far heavier than we imagine. But this story also shows us God's mercy. As Psalm 51 says, "A broken and contrite heart God will not despise." When David sought God in repentance, he still received promises and hope. Through Solomon's rise, God rebuilt this broken family. Let us learn precious lessons from this story. Cherish family. Stay away from sin. Guard our hearts. For family harmony is worth more than all glory. If this story has touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and share this video to bring these precious revelations to more people. Let us grow together in biblical wisdom. Looking forward to meeting you in the next Bible story. May God's word continue to guide your path.